So we're here at night for QCA. I'm sorry, the video's all grainy and everything. I've been putting this rack together, but we're going to jump right in. We have a lot to cover tonight. This is the first of our change schedule time. We're going to be doing QCA at 9:30 to 10:30 every night, which allows everybody to get home. And I'm going to try tomorrow to do coffee talk at 8 a.m., which is another change. So since there's nothing really to see here, we're going to go back to the screen and start processing some of the questions that are here. We won't necessarily get to all these questions that are here, but I mean, eventually we could get to them. So let's do to-do.md for some of these, and we'll go to that for some of those. There's actually some other really important questions. So if you are here and you're just joining, you want to know what's going on or whatever, just go ahead and ask a question in the Twitch chat, and you have priorities. So if you come join us and you have a question and you want it interactively responded to, this is the time and to come here for this kind of thing. We do also have the QCA in the topics channel, and I'm going to be going there. In fact, I've been making a good habit of posting any of the questions that we answer here to the Discord, just so I have a look there. So we have a question from Andy Askey, who's one of our favorite streamers, and I'm going to go ahead, since somebody else has put a question in the chat. We'll do the Mark Russinovich one after that random. Okay, we'll cover that next. Actually, why don't we do your question first, since you did ask while you were here, and I mean you did, you asked it right away. So let's go ahead and answer your question really first, and then we'll go back and answer the other ones from Discord, because that would be consistent. So the first question: are you familiar with Mark Russinovich? So did you see him tweet about the deprecated C++ and replacing it with Rust? No, not familiar with him. Not really interested in Rando's opinions on replacing C and C++ with Rust. It's a continual thing with me. People talk about it all the time, and almost every time they talk about it, I know people want it to be a thing. It's not a thing. He's the CTO for Azure, working for Microsoft. I thought Satya was he's the CTO, Azure. Yeah, but to me, that's still very rando. Yeah. Gamozo can come talk to me. And Gamozo is on my About page, just in case you're wondering. Don't give me crap about Gamozo. I have Gamozo listed on my personal Twitch About page because guess what? Gamozo is one of the people who actually understands Rust and is using it properly for what it's supposed to be used for. Chris Nova is also using Rust for things and gave it 4 out of 10 stars in her tweet. And server service for system internals tools for Windows. Okay, and you just made my case completely. Are we going to take direction from someone who does system internal tools for Windows as a knowledgeable source for what we should be doing with our kernels? No, he did not. No, you guys keep lying about Rust. You just lie. There's another lie. Here's a lie. Linus Torvalds confirmed that he'll be adding Rust to the kernel. That is the biggest lie from Rust, the community, since the beginning. All right? It comes up because the Rust community, and this is my biggest gripe of all, the Rust community continues to make up their own reality and tell people lies in order to promote their agenda. They constantly do it. They're doing it all the time. And if they would be honest and they would actually send you to the releases, and they would send you to those things, then you would catch that. Okay? So let me give you an example of this, okay? If anybody actually cares to get the truth on this instead of getting it from a blog or something, right? Then you need to go read the actual words from Linus Torvalds. And I'm not going to go look them up right now. I'm just going to suggest that you go do it. Torvalds very explicitly said the Linux kernel will never be written in anything but C. And then he said, it's about time, you go read, I'm paraphrasing his words. He said, it is about time eventually that somebody consider other languages for drivers and stuff so that, and he goes, and he specifically said, and it might not be Rust. That was last year or 2 years ago. And now he's kind of softened. He says, yes, okay, the Rust community is like crazy, crazy obsessive. They're really good. And writing drivers in Rust is probably worth doing. But he's not adding Linux kernel support for Rust. That's not what he's doing. Bram confirms Vim will be written in Rust. Nice. That would be a great use of Rust because it would be faster and everything. Can you give me a direct link to that, Archdrone? I would love to see that in writing because I do not trust anything the Rust community says. I've been lied to so many times by the Rust community and by people who are, really zealous about the language. And then I get interested in it and I go look it up and I wasted 2 hours getting the actual truth. So the truth, if you want to go, and I don't trust me, go do your own research. Okay. If you want to go read the Linux mailing list, you can do the search for this. I've talked about this a lot. All right. The truth is that they are allowing you to write kernel mods in Rust. Kernel mods is not the kernel. Yes, it's true that with the monolithic kernel, most of the kernel is consisted of mods. And that means that technically you could say Rust is in the kernel. But the kernel is not, there's like how many millions of lines of Rust code? I mean, of Linux, of C code. It's not going to be rewritten in Rust. All right. So I'm trying to just put it out there. Do I think that Rust has a place in kernel mod development? Hell yeah. And I think it should actually be considered in addition to C. I'm very much on board. So there's two people, and these people are in my About page. And for the few people who actually have read my About page, I think it's kind of funny that somebody's giving me crap about Gamoza coming after me when if they had read my About page, they would see, and I will show it to you, that I actually do respect Rust developers. There's only 2 that I respect, 3 now with Chris. So there's only 3 Rust developers on planet Earth that I have any respect for whatsoever because they don't lie. Everybody else lies through their teeth all the time because they don't bother to look it up. And I'm going to tell you who they are. I'm going to show you on my About page. So I'm going to quote my About page here because I've become sort of famous as a Rust hater. I had a Reddit. I've become sort of famous as a Rust hater. I had. That's a good thing to repeat. I actually had somebody, go off on me and create a Reddit post just about my anti-Rust stuff because I'm just calling it like I see it. I have a YouTube video. If you want to go read all of this stuff, you can go watch the YouTube. I have a playlist on it and everything. But here's what I have to say about Rust on my About page. Okay. So what about Rust? And I'm going to read you this. Okay. You're probably baiting me. Okay. I can't tell if you're baiting me or not. Sometimes I can't read your things. So be nice. Yeah. So Gamozo and Brian Cantrell, and I directly link to their videos, from Oxide Computing are the only people doing anything compelling with Rust because I probably need to change this. I need to put Chris Nova. So Chris Nova is absolutely somebody that I would trust to look at things that Chris has done. Lots of stuff in the Kubernetes world and really made a name for themselves and is a really great Twitch streamer. You should go watch Chris. And Chris is doing a lot of coding right now in Rust, and Togglebit is on the stream a lot helping. Togglebit's a huge Rust proponent, but Togglebit lies all the time about Rust, like straight up lies. And I had to unfollow him. He's a great guy. He's an amazing person, but he lies like crazy about Rust. Chris doesn't, but Togglebit really does know Rust. And but I would never trust Togglebit as a source of truth, as a balanced source of truth about anything. They're just such a Rust fanboy. Gamozo, however, I do trust, and Gamozo complains about Rust all the time, compile times and all this other stuff. But Gamozo has said in a stream that I watched once upon a time, Gamozo said, Rust is tailor-made for my niche. Those are his exact words. And I can't overstate how much I agree with that. What does he do? What does Gamozo do? Gamozo spends all of his time, almost all of his time, fuzzing by writing operating systems really quickly in a virtual environment sort of thing. So he's able to rapidly develop operating systems to practice fuzzing different problems with hardware and things like that. Stuff that's well beyond my level of comprehension, but I really enjoy watching it, and so does everybody else. But he openly says that is his niche, and he still complains about it, you know. So Brian Cantrell and the hour-long video, which is extremely entertaining, is it time to rewrite the operating system in Rust? It ultimately concludes, no, it's not. But maybe one day we can do, this was a while ago, but maybe one day we could do, some of the side stuff in Rust, and things like Alacrity. If Alacrity wasn't so freaking buggy on Windows, I would use it. I love it. But so here's the thing, from a practical perspective, rewriting something from scratch that already works, for which we already know where the bugs are, is bad. And nobody who's in the Rust community wants to hear that rewriting something in Rust is bad, because they want to redo it. It'll be better. It'll be faster. It'll be safer. No, it won't. It'll be much less safe, because you have just taken on rewriting a project that's already been completed, for which we already know the bugs that exist. For greenfield projects, yes, right, yes. But Rust people think I'm like throwing water on their fire, and I'm like, you know what? I'm coming from a practical perspective as a technologist. It is not time to rewrite millions of lines of code that have been written in C and Rust. It's not more user friendly. Oh my God, no. Are you kidding me? It's so easy to shoot yourself in the foot with Rust. That's another thing that they lie about all the time. The Rust people will lie to you constantly and tell you, "Oh, it's safer. They try to encourage beginners to use it." By the way, Rust has got great documentation. They'll encourage you to use Rust because it's apparently, beginner friendly and all this other stuff, and they get a whole kinds of JavaScript people. The reason it's the most beloved language is because a bunch of people who answer Stack Exchange surveys, in other words, in parentheses, people who don't matter, have decided to answer a survey saying that Rust is the most beloved language. So honestly, most of the people this is why I get so frustrated. Most of the people who like Rust are barely JavaScript script kiddies who've just come into their own and are like, we want something more. We want a cooler language. We're not going to do Python. And so they become these, Rust people who just go off the rails, and they have no idea what they're writing, and they write absolute shit. So, it's like, all I want to say is, it makes me feel good to know that people like Chris Nova and Gamozo and Brian Cantrell, who are very well versed in multiple languages. And by the way, I went into this like that. I went into this with a very, very open mind 2 years ago. And I ran into wall after wall after wall. Guess who just ran into the same walls that I ran into? Chris. Go read Chris Nova's tweet. Twitter.com. So this is somebody who's relatively new to Rust, who I very much respect, saying, oh my God. There's Chris. All right. So it has great documentation. It's really great. So what are the technical reasons of REST API in this age? Let's see. And Chris, I like Chris because Chris is pretty disruptive in her opinions on things. And she's fun, and we disagree on some things. I mean, she's an Emacs user, for example, but it makes total sense because she deals with code bases that are much bigger than I do. But anyway, I'm looking for her little note here. There's a book. She actually made it. It went out. It got printed, apparently. She got Hacking Capitalism made. We need to go read that. And so what do you like about System D? I mean, she ended up writing a small write-up of why and how behind my new Rust project. And she put it on Y Combinator, of course, which is something I would never do. Chris is in the game of perception management, and she's really good at it. She's got books out there. She does conferences. She's constantly on social media. I don't do that shit. So more power to her. She's done a lot, and I trust her to look at this thing. I hate Y Combinator. You will never ever see me post anything to Hacker News or Y Combinator. I detest it. It's a bunch of pseudo intellectual technologists out here fighting about things they have no fucking idea. It's almost as bad as dev.to, and I don't want to do it, but I respect Chris a lot. So anyway, so so looking at Rust virtual machines and the mode Kubernetes, what would you like? Good conversations on the internet. I'm trying to find the comment about the 4 out of 10, which she said recently, because I do listen to what she has to say. One of the things I like about Chris is that she spends so much time practically evaluating things, not just because it's sexy, although she is victim to that a little bit. I do think that she does things a little bit because they're sexy and they're going to get attention. But when I started reading what she was doing in Rust, I was like, I was very appreciative of where she's coming from. And I can't find her comment anymore. I wonder if she took it down. Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, just go watch Chris and watch what she does with it. So back to what I was trying to say. Is no show for money. So let's talk about this again. So if you want to follow reliable sources on Rust, I'm just going to say this. Follow what Chris Nova is doing, what Gamozo is doing, and what Brian Cantrell is doing. They have extensive experience in multiple languages, including Go, which means they know the practicality of Go, and they're not afraid to call out the warts in the language. And in Chris's case recently, they're very dedicated to working on improving those things and getting rid of them. And it's possible that Rust could become better, but I don't think so. The syntax of Rust to me is so abysmally horrible. Rob Pike will never give us the true version of what he actually thinks about the language, because if he did, it would absolutely be negative, because the language syntax is like a clusterfuck of shit from all over the place that's completely unnecessary. It's an absolute hobbyist language that was not conceived in the depths of Google for very specific purposes by the creator of Unicode and Plan 9 and Unix. And, as Go was written to be to address the needs of the enterprise and the needs of IT in the modern world. And Rust is not made for that. Rust has one thing really well that it likes to get behind, and that's the whole memory thing. But then if you're going to do anything low level, you have to turn it all off anyway in order to get to anything. So I really do not like Rust. If you were to put some of the projects that are of the same scale in Go right now in Rust, you would be waiting for compilation times and probably in the order of like 30 minutes to an hour, because its compilation time is horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And they bite off. They justify the compilation time of Rust by saying that, well, the compiler is doing all the work, for you, and it's saving you from yourself and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, fine, but I don't need that. And that's kind of Go's thing. Go and C's thing are, well, if I do this, then the memory leak's going to leak and then people are going to die and everything. And I say, well, don't do that. I mean, there's no more powerful language than C. Probably assembly, if you want to get that close to the iron. C and assembly are going to be the thing to go to forever. They're never going to be replaced by something like Rust. They're not. And if they are, I mean, if you're doing IPC communications and you're like, you need shared memory for that. And if you're going to use shared memory, you can't use Rust for those things unless you turn on unsafe. And at that point, your code has become so convoluted and complicated that you're going to make a mistake because you can't fucking understand your code. And you'll say, well, that's because you don't understand Rust. Well, you know what? If you compare that exact same code to C code that does a similar thing, where there's like decades of established tools to find those bugs and everything, and instead of trying to introduce new code with new syntax to do the same thing, then I'm like, what the hell? I mean, this is supposed to be your main thing that you're doing, right? And now you're telling me that there's no garbage collection, right? I mean, you're going to turn off memory safety because you need to do something significant with Rust? I mean, your whole thing is that you're tiny and you have small runtimes and you can fit into IoT devices, which is all cool. I want to try that. I really do. I want to see what it's like to code Android devices with Rust. I want to look at all that. I want to look at it as a C++ replacement. I mean, the whole class-based object-oriented programming of C++ is abysmally bad. And so, yeah, changing the paradigm by writing it in Rust is a good idea. I agree with all of that, but I don't trust the Rust community. The Rust community has gone on record lying multiple times. And the worst part is they have a ton of bloggers who will blog the lies and tell you their version of the truth. including people who posted for Amazon, TechCrunch, Weeping Commuter, and a bunch of other ones. So if you're gonna get into the Rust thing, and I know this is kind of a rant, but if you're gonna get into the Rust thing, I ask you to just be really careful about your sources and make sure you read, because Rust is not going to be in the Linux kernel. That is a lie. And everybody who writes that is writing it because they want to get the sensationalism of it and pull you in. And if they get you in and then you're reading about it and you're like, what? This isn't in the kernel. This says they're going to allow us to do mod probe drivers and stuff like that. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. It's a huge qualification on the thing. I mean, but the way they write the headlines, you think that they're going to rewrite the whole Linux kernel in Rust. And as Torvalds has very specifically shot that down many, many times. Poor Torvalds, by the way, right now, he's having to deal with all these Rust people that are coming at him saying, "This, you want a real laugh? Go read the thread where Torvalds, believe it or not, is like soft pedaling his disagreement because they ripped out all of their testing. They ripped out all of their testing, and he's like, well, it crashed for me when I tried it, and it had all these like horrendous errors and stuff. And he's like, well, that's because it's just in the test mode. And we're just doing that. Was just the one you did is just in test mode. That stuff won't be there in the final version. Dude, if you can find that list, it's in the mailing list, right? If you really want to laugh, if you really want to just seriously a belly laugh, watch Torvalds express extreme I want to say willpower to not blow up in his normal way with the Rust people trying to push Rust into the Linux kernel. He's trying to be open-minded. You can tell he went to some kind of training and a retreat, and he's trying to be a better person and be open to new ideas, and he knows he's not going to be around forever. And so you can just hear it in his words. You can hear it in his words when he's like going back at him. He wants to call them backbursts that should never have been born, and ask them why they're alive because they're so dumb they couldn't be able to breathe. These are things he's actually said about people. And so he's found this zen, and and now he has to deal with the Rust community. I mean, it's absolutely hilarious. It's probably not hilarious for Torvalds. Torvalds just wants to be out of there. He's like, I just want to exit gracefully. Obviously, these Rust zealots are going to get control of Linux to some degree, so let's make sure it at least happens nicely. But Torvalds actually goes to use this stuff, and he keeps saying, look, maybe it's something I'm doing wrong or something, but this thing just totally shit the bed and core dumped. And I thought Rust was not supposed to core dump. What the hell? This is a true thread. You can go look up this thread. Rust core dumped on Linus Torvalds while he was trying to use it during an integration. And then they wrote back on the list. This is all documented. And they wrote back on the list and they said, well, you did it wrong. You're not supposed to run it like that. We don't run like that. We're just doing it in testing mode. And he's like, okay, well, you might want to tell me that, or you might want to remove it. And then they have this side debate about whether you should ever have code during active development not have the safeties off, so you don't blow yourself up and shoot yourself in the face with the thing while you're doing your development. So, I mean, at the very least, the Rust team is proposing that their test-driven development is being done without, any of the Rust safeties on. It's just look, my one thing you're going to take away from this is make your own decisions and go read the thread. If somebody comes at you, usually a JavaScript script kiddie who's just found Rust, if they come at you with this Rust shit, make sure you go back it up and you go actually read what Torvalds said, because they're just missionaries on your doorstep trying to get you to drink the Kool-Aid. And then ask them, when has anybody done anything significant in Rust? And it's like, well, it's going to be in the kernel, and it's going to be in this, and it's going to be in this, and it's going to be in this. I'm like, okay, but what is it actually in? What has Rust actually been used for in production today? And I'm like, Alacrity, FZF, Firefox. Seriously, there has not been. They go, well, they're talking about doing boot camp in it, and Oxide Computing is talking about making a whole company based on it. I love Brian Cantrill, but he's been promising us computers for how long? He's now like how many months past due? Chromium confirmed to be rewritten in Rust. Exactly. Chromium is not going to be rewritten in Rust. Oh my God, no. You absolutely not. Don't even joke like that. 5 years ago, our Java is still worth using. Yeah. Yeah, look, you can say code pill. I get it. Saying that it should not be used eventually is one thing. Here's the thing: that argument doesn't follow because Rust came out at the same time as Go, and Go has exploded on the scene. It's become the number one cloud native deployment language. What's Rust been doing during all of that time? I mean, seriously, I'll tell you what it's been doing. Nothing. Nothing but hype. Nothing but hype. Nothing but hype. Rust is all hype. There's people playing with it. There's people who want it to be successful. There's people who are doing like shitty little utilities on the side that don't work. And I'm looking at you too, Alacrity. I'm sorry. I tried to use Alacrity and it blew the fuck up on Windows. It totally destroyed. I was like, screw you. I'm not using this anymore. You know why? Because somebody rewrote a terminal. And yes, it's faster when it works. So, yeah. Yeah, runtime uses a micro VM written in Rust. Firecracker. I've heard about Firecracker a lot. Never seen any code. We're never ever going to be able to see any of the code for that. NVIDIA's rewrite all drivers in Rust. Did they actually? Can you send me a link to that? And when it gets done, let me know. You know what else I used to hear about? I used to hear that this game studio said that they declared very publicly, and it made all over the internet. I don't know if you're serious or not, so you gotta watch me. So seriously, I cannot find a thread anymore, but there was like 2 years ago, there was like a huge thing about all video games were gonna from one studio were gonna be is open source. Okay, Firecracker is a good one to watch. Firecracker is one to watch. Gamozo, Brian Cantrell, and whatever Chris Nova does. Those are things that I would put in the list that you would watch. And those are trustworthy sources. Any of the other stuff, including Hacker News or whatever, it's so overwhelmed with hype that it's you just can't trust it. And this game studio said that they were going to announce, they were going to do all their games from that point on were only going to be written in Rust. And then the guy who did that got released. He said they had an amicable split and the whole studio went back to C++. I mean, I have in my video feed, I have a video of several PhDs who came together and did a thesis disclaiming the Rust claim for memory safety. And they basically took it on and attacked it. And they were like, this is a lie. And they documented it in a very academic way. So, because they're talking about like Rust claims for safety, and then they're opening up all the CVEs on the Rust runtime and the fact that we don't know the origins of the Rust runtime, and we never can because there's no clean pedigree. I mean, these are issues that people who study languages really deeply understand, and that would include people like Brian Cantrell. So, because the guy's like crazy, he knows all kinds of languages. But if you're going to trust a random Rust fanboy, you're taking your life in your hands because that's all I have to say about that. It's very unpopular to say the things that I've said. The one last thing, the entire Rust moderator team, including Burn Sushi, who I had some interactions with on Tumble, who made the Tumble logo. I was involved in the Tumble project for a bit. And they resigned in absolute disgust because the leadership of the Rust team doesn't follow their own code of conduct. And they made a very public statement about how they couldn't participate in it anymore. I made lots of videos about this, but people come at me with the Rust thing and I'm like, why are you so hate on Rust? And I'm like, I'm not hating on Rust. I want it to be successful. I want people to stop lying about it. The community itself has really worried me because the Go community is so boring that there's no reason for them to lie. I mean, you can call it, BDE if you want, but they don't care because they already know that the biggest tools in Cloud Native have already been written in Go and will continue to be written in Go. And so they don't have to overhype it. They got Google behind them, and it is a Google controlled thing. There's no doubt about that. But it's open source to the degree that anything else is, and enterprises love that. They love the fact that Google's on board with supporting this thing long term, so that it's not just a bunch of completely insane people. I'm sorry, they're not insane. That was a metaphor or hyperbole. But some of the people that are running the Rust project are the same people that forked Node.js into IO.js. over a code of conduct. And now they're the same people that are causing the entire moderator team to resign in very public disgust because the people leading the Rust project are not even following their own code of conduct. The very thing that some of them created io.js to fork. And if you don't know this history, you don't know any of this. And but I've been following Rust for a very, very long time, and I've been following these other events. And so when people come at me with the why you hate on Rust stuff, I have to do these big, long-winded, full-hour explanations. And this is probably a good one to modernize my position on this because the last time I did a video was like 2.5 years ago, and it's still my #1 hit video. And I basically made the contention that Rust is actually not safe and it's not fast in the ways that matter because it takes you forever to do anything in Rust. It's like, it takes you forever, right? The game Jackson Daxter was written in Lisp. Ooh, cool. Yeah, Lisp is pretty cool. So anyway, so let's leave that one alone. So again, let me just repeat. I do want to see Rust succeed, but if it does succeed, yeah, it was that video. If Rust actually does succeed, it's probably going to be in spite of its hype and stuff. And if I honestly, if I were a CTO, I would not allow two things in my enterprise under any circumstances: Node.js and Rust. Node.js for backend stuff. The NPM problems, the security vulnerabilities that have been introduced into major enterprises because of Node have no parallel in scale. Maybe SolarWinds, but they are some of the greatest vulnerabilities that have ever been introduced, and it was because of NPM. And I don't want to just bag on Node for it, but it's really ironic that the people who like Node also are Rust people usually. And the other thing that I would never ever let in my enterprise is Rust, and not at any level. And the main reason that I wouldn't Rust people like Dino, well, I mean, I like Dino. I've helped actually. I was one of the first people to help commit on the testing stuff for them. So way back when, I think I like Dino. I just don't think Dino is relevant today with containers. I hope that it finds a niche. I really do, because I absolutely love Ryan Dahl. Ryan Dahl is like one of the best human beings on the planet. To stand in front of an entire congregation of Node people and say 10 things I regret about Node, which is a video everybody should watch today. I absolutely love Ryan Dahl. I love his ability to say I screwed up, I rethought, and now I'm making something better. And I don't get the sense that the Rust community is that way. They are so dogmatic about how they've been doing it, even though they went back and forth on how they were going to do concurrency over the years, like 5 times, before they even, and then packaging and everything. So Docker recants Docker desktop license, but confirms Docker will be rewritten in Rust. Stop trolling me. Stop trolling me with that. That is not true. Everybody's gonna watch that and think it's true. Physics just poorly taught maths. Yes. So I think that was a really good one. So I mean, the Rust fans have become memes. They've turned what could have been a great language. The main reason that I don't trust it is because I don't trust the community and I don't trust the leadership. Neither does the entire moderator team, including one of the primary contributors of the TOML parser, and one of the YAML parsers, Burn Sushi, and others. These are people who don't trust the entire effort. And so when somebody comes around from Microsoft and says, even if it's, by the way, that's an executive CTO, right? So the CTOs tend to buy into things early that are wrong. Like, oh, I don't know, crypto. Let's talk about that. I mean, crypto and NFTs are such a massive failure at this point. It's not even worth discussing. So I don't use that. I don't think I use that. I don't know. We'll go look. So, but then, so I just, I don't trust CTOs to provide, especially a Microsoft CTO, to provide direction at the engineering level about what's going to be the best choice, especially for things that are going to be in the kernel and maybe the Windows kernel. Do I really have to make my case about that? No. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, there's a lot actually. 51% attack. The base algorithm for consensus is flawed. And that's what's his name? Oh God, Brian Ford. That's his conclusion. The guy who made Peg. That's his conclusion about it, and I agree. I agree with it. The base premise of consensus algorithms is flawed. Yep. Anyway, we are out of time. That is pretty much the only time that we have. And my yeah, my Anton's break. Speaking of this, boy, I wish VMware was written in Rust, and maybe my VMs would stay up. Yeah, my VMs are crashing on me lately. My Anton's VMs crashing on me again. So let's ask another question. Let's go see if we can find one while I'm doing it. I won't be able to put it on the screen here for right now. Yeah, see, I don't know what this is about. I can't wait to get off this though. I'm building my rack over here, and then I'll just be able to SSH into an actual machine instead of use the VM over here. And I just redid my pfSense, which I think has something to do with this. There might be an ARP storm or something I'm not aware of. I'll have to go look at it anyway. Yeah, shipping and bike shedding. No, you know. Do you want to get to that one? I mean, what time is it? We have 15 minutes. Let's answer another question here. So, let me bring this actually in. I'll bring the Discord down so we can go look at this. So this is the Discord chat. And we're just going to go ahead and read right from the Discord for right now. We'll have that other problem. It was fun. Yeah. People, I've become known as the guy who's just rants against Rust, but I've said before, I'm not against Rust if they can prove it has value. And so far, I mean, it's on them to do that. So I wanted to answer Anya's question, and this is another one that's really, really important that I answer. I did actually write a huge write-up about that one, so we'll read that. Here's a kind of a fun one. Let's answer. This is from Anyaski, another great streamer. I'm going to shout her out right now. Anya S A S A S C. Did I spell it right? Yeah. And so as a polyglot, can you recommend any specific methodologies, strategies for learning human languages that are also applicable to learning programmatic ones? And the answer I have to that, honestly, is no. And I'm going to go ahead and try to answer right here. My short answer to that question is the best way to learn a language is immersion. And anything short of immersion is a waste of time and money. And I know that's a kind of a radical opinion. The only way to learn language, and that goes for programming too. So, and that means finding a place that you do this. So just give you a quick story. Back when I was in college, I was a Russian major. And before that, I was Mormon, right? And I went to, I was Mormon at the same time, but I went on a French mission to the Caribbean islands, and they have a place called. Did I say Mormon major? I was a Mormon while I was a major. All right, let me restart that. Okay, so once upon a time, I was a Mormon. How about that? And I got called on a Mormon mission. I want to go snowboarding big time. Oh my God. So once upon a time, I was a Mormon missionary, and I got called to the Caribbean islands, and I had to learn French really fast. So, Mormon's not a programming language as far as I know. I mean, it might be. So, one of the things that the Mormons have done really well, and you could make the argument that because of this, Brigham Young University, and I swear by this, Brigham Young University used to host in the language conferences to the world. Yeah, I mean, so say what you want about the Mormons, but the Mormons have two things that are really, really good. I mean, they have a fantastic welfare system. They have really learned how to take care of their own. It's absolutely remarkable. I mean, there's been many times they that the Mormons have been asked to consult with the government on how to provide, Americanized, social programs and stuff like that. Mormons practice socialism 100%. I mean, you can say whatever you want about socialism, but what Mormons do is practice a form of socialism. So, and I know this is a question about language. And the other thing that Mormons do really amazingly is they have, they have really mastered reaching out to other cultures and other languages. And the missionary program from the Mormon Church, I mean, I know there's like the Book of Mormon is made by the guys who were formerly Mormon, by the way, the South Park guys. And I mean, that was been a part of it. The reaching out, the evangelism from the Mormon Church has been a stalwart from the church since its original origins, almost since the first day. I mean, they started proselytizing to the Indians, and they would tell the Indians that this people with dark skin in our Book of Mormon is you, and you are the master race that's going to come back, and Jesus is going to love you. And I'm paraphrasing. Please talk to a missionary if you really want to know. And of course that appealed to them. And then they went to Polynesia, and there's movies about them going to Polynesia and telling them also, hey, you're the elect, you're the Lamanites, blah, blah, blah. And then, so Mormons have had this tradition of proselytizing since the very beginning. And I'm not particularly slamming on them right now. That'll happen another day. But one of the great things about them is that they really, really take to heart the idea of spreading, the Lord's word or whatever to all of these different cultures, and to building a relationship of trust with that culture. And the reason I'm telling you all is, you asked about language learning, right? But the reason I want to tell you this is because this is why the Mormons are so crazy successful learning languages and culture and integrating, and their missionary efforts are so well. I mean, they've taken a huge dip lately because of the internet, right? People can go get the truth on the internet, but their proselytizing efforts are second to none. And the thing that they really learned to do is they've learned to integrate with a culture and to learn that language. And the primary part of that is immersion. And so when I went to the Mormon Training Center, the Missionary Training Center, the MTC they call it, which is just like a stone's throw from BYU. And just I graduated from BYU, and then I graduated in the language department. I worked in the language department. I was in computer and language lab, blah blah blah. And I also lived at the MTC. I was a resident assistant for the missionaries there. I lived with the missionaries in a dorm. I was supposed to tuck them in and make sure they didn't get crazy, and believe me, they get crazy. Well, that's another day, story for another day. And I would teach culture classes in the Missionary Training Center, and I would teach languages to the Missionary Training Center, and I would teach the building relationships of trust and all the other stuff from the missionary handbook to these missionaries to prepare them, because they get, if they're a language missionary, then they get, I think, 4 or 5 weeks. That's it. That's it. That's what they get. And then they have to, go down there and talk to these people and try to get them to join the church. And, and it was absolutely spectacular what they do, because they create an environment where they need to speak their language, SYL, and they're totally, all the time, right? Like, there's kind of a cultural thing at the MTC where you had like the rebel missionaries that would speak English and not do it because they didn't want to, and then you would have, the goody two shoes missionaries. Believe it or not, there's like a whole range of missionaries. Some that get sent back because they screw people that they love, and it's a complete mess. I have so many stories. I have so many missionary stories that I will tell you at another time, not right now. Because I was a leader, I was an assistant to the president, so I had to actually deal with missionaries who'd gone astray and came in, and I had to, help them get through their problems and stuff. And it was a total mess. Oh, hey, look, he's posting. What are you posting, Barney? Stop posting things that I don't know what they are. So, okay, so immersion and syntax, yeah. So I think the best thing to do, first of all, I think that the reading part of the language is easier if you're working on the conversational part of the language. And let me justify that. So I mean, it's one thing. So, like for example, if you just read a book in another language and you just read it out loud, you'll hear yourself. In fact, I used to record myself and I would play it back, right? And I would read it because let's be real. Most languages are not learned by studying the syntax and going through the grammar rules and everything else. And that goes for coding as well. People don't like my messy style for going into Go through the project based thing. It's like I have a thing I want to make. Let's go make that thing. And that goes for language learning. I have a thing I want to say. Let me figure out how to say that thing. And let me write it down so that I can like go say it again next time. That's how children learn. That's the organic method of learning. That's the natural way to learn. And are you going to have gaps? Yeah, there's so many things that I can't say in French or Russian because I've never had to say them. A lot of them are related to computers or something. I have an unusually good vocabulary when it comes to gospel topics. Words that would maybe be esoteric to somebody who just learned French, to go to France or something. I have them because I was always talking about religious topics. So my point is this: if you want to learn a language, whether it's a foreign language or a programming language, your brain is designed to learn best by jumping in and doing it and failing and then correcting and failing and correcting and looking stuff up and failing and correcting and looking up. And it's really, really good when you have somebody else across the aisle from you. So if you want to learn how to program, like we're doing some pair programming on this REST stuff today, and having the two programmers, somebody who's been in the language for a while and somebody who's just getting into it, is really good because, and that's, by the way, why the missionaries pair up. There's always a senior missionary, and this method of learning doesn't just apply to that. It also applies to things like, cultural things that you need to know about so that you don't, walk into a problem, right? So this mentorship one-on-one form of learning applies to everything, including languages. So the best thing you can do, and I lived in the missionary training center. I think hands down the best way to learn a foreign language is move there. And if you're young enough and you can do that, great. If you can't do that, move to a place in the United States or Canada or wherever where you can immerse yourself. And Canada is really fortunate in this regard. Canada has sections of it that everybody only speaks Chinese or only speaks Hindi or only speaks, Quebecois, and which is not quite French, but it's pretty damn close, right? So, my wife will tell you, she's like, well, if people say, well, do you speak German? She goes, well, I speak blah, blah, blah. And it's like her version of German based on her region. Is like Chinatown, Koreatown. Yeah. And so, that is my advice. My advice is save your money. Some of these other tools, I mean, the biggest breakthrough, I used to write software, and I worked for language instruction software. I made a company called Sterling Scholastic Aids when I was in college that helped you learn the Russian roots, which memorizing the Russian roots is, if any other language has that thing, it's extremely valuable because you can kind of decipher a word without looking in the dictionary. I mean, you would get the Russian roots eventually just by looking in the dictionary so many times. But if you learn the roots first, if you memorize the roots in Russian, then when you're looking at a word, you have no idea what it is, you can break it down. This is why, I don't know if this applies to Latin as much, but you can break that word down and no choice but to learn it. Yeah. And so, yeah, and surround yourself with people that'll forgive you for making mistakes. I mean, if you go to France, don't go talk to some hoity-toity, French people. And by the way, I mean, I love French people. Oh my God, so much. But the French are very particular, particularly like French, not like Canadian French. The French, they have an institute for the preservation of their language. I mean, they have a huge amount of pride in their language, and it depends on who you talk to, right? But I mean, they have much less tolerance for the stuff that we do. I mean, I won't lie. French, is winning the culture war against America. I mean, by far, they have problems. French has got problems. And then sometimes they're like completely like no basis in reality. Like the missionary from Paris, who ended up having to almost go home because of screwing up on his mission, which I won't get into. He used to fight with me all the time because he said that France could take America in a war. And I was like, are you completely like discounting all of all of world history here because the British, Americans, and the Russians saved you from World War II. And I don't, do we have to keep talking about things? Well, no, we can totally take you. And he couldn't do a push-up. He had no idea, never done one before. I mean, it's just a different culture. And that was a specific individual from a different culture, particularly a Mormon. And so I don't want to judge I love French people. There's a lot of really amazing French people on Twitch. And I think Twitch is the best place for you to learn a language. You remember that thing about immersion? If you want to get immersed in a language, go watch a French streamer. And just sit there with your Google Translate in another window and listen to everything they say. Try to see if you can understand what it is they're talking about. Maybe watch a French movie here or there. But the problem with watching French movies is the subtitles are often wrong. So they've been paraphrased. So you need to make sure to get subtitles. There is software out there. The Rosetta Stone and things like that are better because they're not causing you to translate into English in your head, which was always stupid. And that, you know, that whole thing about immersion, right? If you teach English as a second language, let's say, which is another great thing to do, a lot of the people who want to learn a language in another culture, they get a TOEFL certificate. It's teaching English as a second language or something, TOEFL or something. And I don't know about Duolingo. I don't know if I would do that. But those are, I like that all that software that's out there is actually coming around and doing that. But let's take the application away for a second. I mean, languages, you know, natural languages are about people. So my biggest single piece of advice here is find people who speak the language, make best friends out of them. And so I did that. I went to Russia. I got a job over there. I suffered, made sure I was talking to them all the time. When I went to, I mean, the best French I ever learned was when my companion was French. And every single, 24/7 a day, I had to speak French. And it was bad because he was Tahitian, and this is another one of my companions that I miss the most. Actually, he's an amazing human being, and he was from Tahiti, and he and I would talk all the time, but he would want to practice his English, and so he would speak English to me, and I was like, no, we're supposed to learn French. And he's like, but I know French. I want to learn English. This is a great opportunity for me to learn English. It was very academic, and so he would always speak English to me, and I would try to speak French to him, but it doesn't work as well because what you want is somebody that's going to reflect back to you, right? So they're going to say something to you, as essentially, yeah, I don't know if I would do it. My look, the biggest thing you can do is find people who speak the language, preferably people that you can make friends with, people that you can talk to, people that will be patient with you. And if you can teach English as a second language, whether it's in a school or something, I mean, some of my best learning was with young people. I would go, I mean, it's particularly kids, because kids just laugh at you. They just think you're hilarious, right? Because you say things silly and they go, hee hee hee, and they make fun of you, and you're like, but you don't feel as attacked, we're talking to an adult French person who, if you get a pronunciation wrong, by the way, fun fact, the French in general, in my opinion, prefer fewer words that are well pronounced than a large vocabulary of things that are horribly pronounced. And I think it's a creative sensibility with the French culture. I that's my experience. Look, I'm not judging anybody. My experience has been that it's so much more important to get as close as possible to pronunciation of things in French. I think other languages are a little bit more, I mean, I know Russian is a little bit more forgiving when I don't nail the pronunciation, but if there's one language you want to get the pronunciation really, really right, it's French, because it buys you more cred with them. Even if you choose your words carefully and you only say things that they would rather that than mistakes and stuff like that. So it just depends on the language. I get the sense that the Italians and the Italians and the Spanish and the Portuguese and Brazilians, I think they're much more forgiving. But the actual French people are very, very uptight, frankly, about their language, and they should be. It's a very rich language. It's a very amazing language. It's the French have won the Civ 5 culture war. I mean, they had every country on the planet wanting to be them for a very long time. I mean, their influence is so strong. It even went into some of the Asian countries during the Catherine era and that kind of time frame. So there's a lot of negative things in any history that you look at, but that, I mean, that's part of learning the language. And as for coding, I think that that's the same thing for coding. I really do. I think that if you want to learn a language, like, set aside the books for now, find something that you really want to do, and do that thing, and search and search and search the internet, search the internet, search the internet. How do I do this? Okay. How do I do this? And then look at good code. And that is the equivalent of making a good friend in a natural language you can talk to, right? So not only are you speaking the language, but you're hearing them speak and you're digesting those words. And then when you see the words written, you're like, oh, that's that word so-and-so was using. And when you do read, do a certain percentage of reading out loud. Although at some point in a foreign language, you want to stop reading out loud so that your eyes can get to the point where they're glazing over the words. The Firm was the first fictional book that I read in Russian. Back in the, I have lost my ability to just read a Russian book. I could do it, but you have to have a dictionary with you. So hopefully that's been, I mean, if I've gone over time, which I have slightly, this is a really, really passionate thing with me. I really, really love languages, and I think the world would be a better place if we took the time to get to talk to each other. And that's what I would suggest about that. I got into any conversation in the second language. Yeah, especially if you're young. Yeah, Hangul, Korean written language. You learn to read it and plane right over from the U.S. That's how Creole is. There are certain languages that are easier than others. I mean, Russian has 9 declensions, and every word changes depending on how you know what tense you're in and stuff. So anyway, those are some considerations. If you do pick up a language, let me know. I won't lie, I miss it. I mean, I really deeply miss it. One of the greatest satisfactions from Twitch is the chance to use some of my ancient language skills and to go out and, I mean, I will never forget 2 years ago. Was anybody here? So 2 years ago, I had some people who spoke French come in my stream, and I just spoke French to them, and all my English people were complaining, like, we don't understand anything. And I'm like, just give me a second. And the entire night was French. My whole channel was French for that night. And they showed me all of the, like, we were talking about Vanessa Paradis from back in pop culture back in the day, and they're using all their modern French memes. I mean, we have American memes, but there's memes in French, there's memes in any language. And it was just so amazing because it was just like, it was like going to another country, another world, because they have all their pop culture is like totally different. There's some things that cross over, but so much of it doesn't, and I personally like really value that. That's just me. So you get me to talk a long time about that. And so the end of this is like, find someone who natively speaks the language and become their best friend. I actually did an affidavit for asylum for 2 Russians when I was in BYU. I helped them prepare an English affidavits for their application for asylum, and which is a story all by itself. And I wrote it in English for them, and we became friends as close as you can get with this particular type of person. I mean, it's not somebody I would naturally have been friends with, let's put it that way. But we became roommates, and so rather than paying, an extra $1,000 a month or whatever to go to the Russian house and get yelled at by Victoria Mikhailovna, there's a clip about her. And I was able to create an immersion situation. Now, it turns out that I also met my first wife that semester. I spent almost no time at home. So that wasn't as valuable, but I did get a chance to go over to Russia. I went over to Russia and worked in Russia for probably 4 months. with nobody else. And there was a big part of that time I lived in Moscow. My best Russian ever was when I lived in Moscow. I did the train back from Moscow to St. Petersburg with the tourists on it. And so most of the time that I was there was running around organizing stuff for Russian operations and thing. And I was really, really deeply immersed in it. That was when I started really dreaming in Russian a lot. And I miss it, actually. I really miss it because it was a way I mean, I'm glad I had that experience. I hope that you all get an experience, whether it's Russian or Ukrainian. And by the way, the moment that I realized that I really had the language down really well was in Ukraine, ironically. I was working with a Russian in Ukraine to organize a Ukrainian tour on the Dnieper River. And in fact, one of the presidents had flown in, and they actually mowed their lawn on the road that leads up to the airport, which they normally never do. And I have that area that we're seeing in the war scenes all the time, that the central ploshad, with like the thing there. I was there. I remember being there, and so I've been really feeling this whole conflict a lot. But nothing makes it more real than having an interpreter who is you to be able to kind of make sense of it. Did you try those sponge cakes? Have vodka in them? Get drunk from those cakes over there? I've never had that. I personally have never gotten drunk from a sponge cake. My favorite Russian thing, I mean, the best food I ever had in Russia actually was not on the ship, believe it or not. It was when I was staying with this mother and her two daughters who were at the conservatory in St. Petersburg, and they needed to make ends meet. So the head tour guide in St. Petersburg arranged for me to stay someplace, and they gave up their master bedroom to me. And I mean, God, I can see them. I'm going to cry because I can see their faces. Is one of the most amazing experiences of my life. And they were always so curious there. I mean, these women were insanely talented. I cannot even begin to describe. I mean, I would come home and the mother would make these amazing banquets because I was paying for dinners and stuff, but I was paying with American dollars and rubles back then. The exchange rate was crazy, right? So, and I would bring home like a Milky Way bar that I paid like $1 for, and they would put it on a plate and cut it up for and say thank you, Robin. And it was just so amazing. I want people to have. I want to learn Portuguese. Yes, it was such an amazing experience, and they had this big TV, a big Russian TV. That were famous for blowing up and killing families, which I don't know if that was a myth or not, but that was the thing. And they would ask me if it was really in America, if it was really like Santa Barbara. They were watching like 6-year-old Santa Barbara reruns, and they were addicted to them all. And there's these three women, they'd be in there watching it, and I'd be trying to study my language in the other room or recovering because it was so tiring. And I mean, I just cannot overstate how happy I am that I had that. I mean, I was alone, but I wasn't really alone, And this is where the immersion thing comes. It takes a certain type of personality to do that. I mean, there was many times walking into that apartment in dark alleys where people would ask me what time it was because they were trying to check to see if I was American and they were going to mug me or something. And at the time, Russia was still very violent. It still is. I mean, it's obviously very on the whole. I mean, I don't know if that's true compared to New York or even downtown Charlotte, but that family and these women that were, that had dedicated their life to music, and they were, one was a pianist and the other one was played the viola, or the violin, I think, the alto violin, I think. And they were just crazy cool. But we asked about food. Best food I've ever had, I had there. So that's the first time I've ever had prostokvasha, which is basically they take milk, sit it on the counter, and let it stay there for like a month. And then you eat it. Was there. I mean, the borscht with smetana, if you've ever had borscht and you haven't like put a dollop of sour cream in there, nobody does in America. They don't have true borscht, they would hand collect mushrooms. They would go shrooming. It's a huge thing in Russia. And they would let those soak like in a bucket with water in it for like a week, and they would get all fermented and broken down, and then they'd make mush. I sometimes wonder if the reason I have a mushroom allergy now is because I ate mushroom soup there, because it was so good. I mean, you've never had mushroom soup until you had Russian mushroom soup. It was so good. But I mean, and I ate a lot of black caviar. In fact, I'm pretty sure my first son is autistic because of it. My ex-wife ate nobody wanted their black caviar. So you could buy a tin of black caviar for $2. The good stuff, right? And so on the ship, we would have black caviar all the time, and they'd bring it out and they'd bring the butter, hibs muslim, which is, bread with butter. And then, you put your black caviar on there. If you've ever had caviar before, that's the only way to eat it. This whole like take a spoon and just eat the caviar. No. What you do is you get some bread and you put some butter on there, and then you just slather that thing with caviar. It's so good, especially if you have a beer, because it's really salty, right? I didn't have beer, but we would have, compotes or whatever. Compote is weird. It's like they take dried fruit and stick it in your water and just let it like inflate with nothing else. It's the strangest thing, but a lot of people drink compote over there. Anyway, my wife would eat all the caviar, and sturgeon is notoriously bad at having lots of mercury in it. So I'm pretty sure. I don't know. We don't know. Many spoken languages. Let's learn Korean. What can you do? You can just voice chat with people and practice speaking. That's a great idea. So the technology that exists today to practice. Another thing that's really great is Second Life. So some of you know I was Mohax. Mohax in Second Life for years, since 2007. I was quite active over there. I won't get into all of that, but one of the things that I like to do the most was go to France. I would go to France and we would walk around, and they have recreations of the Tour Eiffel and all of that, and we would walk around and you could just see people talking Russian, or you could listen to them talking Russian. I imagine voice chat would be the equivalent today. Second Life's still pretty active, but I can't heartily recommend it to people. It takes a particular type of personality, and it's kind of undergone some changes recently. So I don't know if it's even worth recommending. I haven't been back in years, but anyway, the point is that there's lots of opportunity to go interact with other people. Who knows? You might meet your spouse. A lot of people have done that. They've gone abroad, and my ex cousin-in-law, I think I was accurate. He learned to teach English as a second language after his Mormon mission. He went to one of the Asian countries and taught English to businessmen and made bank. He made really good friends with one of the executives, who gave him a permanent position, and he married his daughter, and he was like, totally solid. Yeah. So, I mean, he's like, screw this. I'm staying here. He just, he did. But you got to watch out for the culture differences if you do that. A lot of those marriages fail. There are a lot of missionaries that went down to the Caribbean and came back with a wife, and those marriages, I would say probably half of them failed. And it wasn't because of, the Mormonism or anything. It was mostly because of the culture differences. And I actually once had a white Mormon mission president tell me something that I still actually agree with. It's like, look, it's hard enough to stay married, let alone add extra reasons to have conflict in your life. Now, there's so many, mixed culture marriages that do work completely. But my wife was married to, a Chinaman, and now she's not, and so I don't want to get judgmental, but unless you're okay with leaving a marriage, and if it doesn't work, and that's not a huge, problem for you, which I think it should be less of a problem for people. I think it should be let out of marriages if it's not working, and go about it amicably, as opposed to forcing. I mean, this whole thing, you got to find your eternal mate forever and get it right, otherwise you're going to go to hell, kind of Mormon idea. The reason being is because if you allow yourself more latitude and things don't work out, then taking a chance with someone from a radically different culture than yours, is the thing. And people change over time, which is also a problem, right? So if you marry somebody because of they say you marry your opposite when you're young, and I think that goes culturally too. I think we tend to be attracted to somebody from a different culture even more when we're young than when we're older. When we're older, we just want to find ourselves. We just want to marry ourselves. We just want to be able to have somebody get your references and be able to make jokes and just be able to talk on end about things and just understand each other. And so I if you're okay with making a change, divorce and that kind of thing, then go for it. But if you're not and you're looking for like a life partner forever, then I would maybe be really careful about adding additional friction points to your relationship that might not seem like a problem now because the sex is good and all of that, but later on, they might become an issue. And who knows, that could be whether, if you're in the same religion, if you have the same core beliefs, I think almost any marriage can make it. But, so I don't know where that came from, but that's a good place to end. So, we'll put that under the A, QCA advice, the sex life. Yeah, I mean, when you're first married, I mean, come on. I mean, that the sex can power you through like, the next 7 years, which is about the time people start to get. Look, it's supposed to be suitable for work. We haven't said anything inappropriate there. I'm just telling you facts here. And hey, you know what? Guess what? Sexual compatibility matters if you're going to marry somebody. Yeah. Yeah. You don't need to feel any guilt saying that if whatever. So there. Time for me to stop talking now. Before I get in trouble, Fullhammer's going to write something in questions. What are they writing? Where can I find a better Vim guide from you? I have just barely found all of my notes that I took over a year and a half while taking people through Vim Tutor that has my own personal guide for Vim guide. The best places to go to learn Vim that I can tell you are so rdbx.gg/vi survive and https://rdbx.gg vi magic, and that talks about Unix filters and stuff like that. No, Anya, no. Désolé, je suis désolé. Eh ben, so yeah, ce soir, it's like, yeah, everybody knows that one. Yeah. Okay. On that note, if you're young, just jump in, man. And by young, I mean anybody under 40. If you're over 40, I'm sorry, you're old. You got to start using the old word, maybe older. If you're me, you're like ancient. And like, Zoomers look at me and I'm like, what the hell? Why is this guy even on Twitch? How does he know what Twitch is? It's funny. I was watching. I'll end with this. I was watching just for the hell of it. We have HBO for another like 2 weeks or something, and I was watching. What's his name? Real Time with Bill Maher. I was watching Bill Maher, and oh my God, that guy was like slamming Zoomers and millennials like crazy. And I was like, listen to him, I'm like, dude, why are you so harsh? Why are you so harsh on the Zoomers? It's like, they're all lazy. They all think they can make, they're retiring and becoming travel bloggers. And back in my day, we only, we had a job first and then we did that. And it's just like totally ripping on them. I was like, this guy has no idea what is happening. And then I was, why is that relevant? Because I was looking at him and I'm going, I'm not him. He has no desire to seek to understand the position of the people from the younger generation. She's just making fun of him the whole fucking time. It's just so horrible. I was just like, oh God. He's like, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff he says makes a lot of sense. And some of it, I'll admit, generationally, I sort of like get what he's coming from, but this is a human being who has no desire to understand the concerns of the younger generation. He's just happy to categorize them and send him on his way. And the reason I mentioned it all, as I said, is because I realized that, generationally, yes, I have quite a distance away from everybody here, but but I'm not that, man. I'm not that. I mean, I'm seeking to understand the challenges of the current generation and what it is that motivates them and can pull them into wanting to learn Linux and tech and things like that, and maybe make a contribution that matters. Do I? You know what the best thing about, and this is going to sound like pandering. I don't mean it to. One of the best things about the younger generation that I read about from another guy who does a study on millennials is that they're unsatisfied with work unless it makes a difference. And we're making fun of them for that. It's like, why? No, they finally come around. They're like, an entire generation says, no, I'm not going to be my parent who goes and gets a gold watch and has nothing to show for it and dies and married for 60 years to somebody he hates. And like, no, I don't want that. I want to live my life. I want to live it more like, recently heard a whole thing about, David Bowie and the way David Bowie was way ahead of his time culturally, because he was, sucking the marrow out of life from the very beginning. And, so, and that doesn't mean you practice hedonism. It just means that you want something out of life. And I think that's fantastic. I think that realizing that early is a good thing. There are some things that we have to do that we don't want to do, in order to pay the bills, and God knows I've been reminded of that. But anyway. So I don't even know if that has a question associated with it. I think I'm just going to cut myself off here. Like, right, Java. Yeah, exactly, exactly. Java is a very well-paying language. So is COBOL, right? I mean, there are things we have to do. I mean, there are certain people among the younger generation, which I find absolutely fascinating all by itself, who have been able to categorize, one person comes to mind that I happen to know, sex work from their ethics. And I know one person in particular who regularly, she's a sex worker. It's you don't need to worry, but she's also a social worker, and she has very clear delineation between the two. And she does not associate her identity with the thing that's getting her the money. But she realizes that in this world, in order to be a social worker and to have a minimal living, that she has to do the sex, which is just a problem all by itself. But the thing that's amazing about this person I'm talking about is that they've accepted that that's the way the world is. And they're like, I'm going to work within that framework to try to change it and do stuff. Right. And I find that, I'm not saying go be a sex worker. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is learning to balance doing things that you might have a problem with ethically, or that might not be your first choice, with the things that you want to do that are going to make a difference, that are part of your life goals. You already bought a stripper pole. I knew it. I knew I shouldn't have said that. I knew I shouldn't have said anything. Yeah, I should have shut up. Anyway, on that note of stripper pole, that'll be the last thing on the screen. Thank you for changing your career. I mean, you look, I sometimes use the metaphor prostitute myself to corporate America, and I feel like that, right? I've now look, am I, even a sex worker can say when, right? I mean, that's the whole Julia Roberts thing. I say who, I say when, I say who. It's a famous quote from Pretty in Pink, right? That's not the wrong movie. Oh, what was it? I say when, I say who. What is that? I can't remember. Hey, what's up? Yeah, what a great time to walk in. Anyway, so consider this exactly. So, but working for corporate America, you can say I don't want to do this kind of thing, right? So there's like, I have a line. There's like, I am not going to do this for this company. I just don't agree with it. Crypto comes to mind. So, but at the same time, it's not the thing that gives me meaning in life. Believe it or not, a lot of the streaming is what gives me my meaning in life. And that's really sad. But that, and obviously spending the time with my family and providing for my kids and stuff. And my kids are at the age, just in case you're wondering, my sons are at the age where they're in college and they're like totally embedded, and they want a little bit of attention every once in a while. But imagine when you were in college, you didn't want your parent like calling you all the time and everything. So I'm struggling with how much attention to give them, because I don't want to be that guy who's like calling them all the time, but I also don't want to be the guy who's like never calling, So it's kind of a tough balance there. If you have any advice for me, uh, maybe I could ask you the question: how often should I contact my college kids? What do you think? Do you think giving them a call like every 2 weeks is kind of a thing? Once a week, like on Sundays or something? Like give them a call once a month, once a week. I think once a week is pretty heavy. Yeah, texting in between maybe. Yeah, bi-weekly I think is probably where I would be. I'm kind of thinking about myself too, right? Because if I had most of the time when in college, I would go back home and all I wanted to do was abandon college for my brain, eat a lot of free food, and just have them sit and listen to me, right? Because you kind of feel alone when you're in college, right? You may have friends and stuff. 1 and 2 weeks, I think that's probably the way to go. Yeah, I want to do better with that, but you know, I mean, your kids go. I just they know I'm here, and I'm like a Discord channel away. In fact, this is our Discord channel right here. We made this channel way back when. Mary, it's my kids. I won't click on it because I don't want to dox them and stuff. But they have their own channel and they talk with each other all the time and stuff. Um, and I fly them in once a year or so these days. Yeah, I generally that's what I wanted. I wanted to create an environment where they could reach out to me when they needed me and they just knew I was there for them, right? That it wasn't going to bother me to have them contact me. And they have done that. They've texted me and say, hey, can I talk to you? Because they're trying to figure the majors out and stuff like that. Trying to get me to take my hat off. No. So I teach them to check over. But I have, I mean, not my parents. I'm a horrible son. I've pretty much, disconnected from my family. But lovers say when he was offered a cake. Oh, I do not know. It sounds like a nice joke though. So, I prefer pie. Nice. Um, so yeah, I think that, thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback. And on that note, and that horrible joke, we're going to go ahead and end the YouTube video. So goodbye YouTube. Again, we'd love to see you in here. Come say hi to us. And Matt, if you're still there, hanging on for dear life while I talk your ear off. I know I'm not letting you get a word in edgewise today, but it's always great to have you there. And we'll see you guys later.